Hello friend, welcome to our channel. This video describes an incident that will shock you and is considered a memorable incident in the world. Let's move on to the video. The term London smoke most commonly refers to the catastrophic air pollution disaster known as the Great Smog of London, which engulfed the city in early December 1952. It was an environmental tragedy of unprecedented scale, where smoke, soot, fog, and toxic industrial emissions combined to create a dense, poisonous cloud that covered London for several days. This event is considered one of the worst air pollution crises in human history and a turning point in environmental policy. London had always been known for its fog, a mixture of natural mist and smoke from burning coal. For centuries, people even referred to this dirty fog as pea soupers because of its yellow-green color. However, nothing prepared the residents of London for the extreme conditions that developed during the smog of 1952. This was not simply unpleasant weather, it was a deadly event that paralyzed the city. The smog began forming on December 5, 1952, after a period of cold weather forced Londoners to burn large quantities of coal to heat their homes. Coal in post-war Britain was cheap but extremely poor in quality, containing high levels of sulfur. When burned, it released large amounts of smoke, soot, and sulfur dioxide into the air. At the same time, a strong anticyclone settled over London, bringing cold, still air with no wind to disperse pollution. The warm air above the city acted like a lid, trapping the cold air and all the pollutants in a phenomenon known as a temperature inversion. As a result, smoke and fog mixed together and simply hovered over the city at ground level. Very quickly, visibility dropped to only a few meters. Londoners described being unable to see their own feet. Even indoors, the smog seeped through cracks under doors and through window frames. The smoke was thick, oily, and yellowish-brown in color, with an intense sulfur smell that irritated the eyes and nose. London's buses, trains, and taxis stopped functioning because drivers could not see the roads. Only a few underground trains continued to run, but many passengers were afraid to leave the stations because the air outside had become suffocating. Emergency services found themselves almost helpless due to the poor visibility. Many people attempted to protect themselves by covering their faces with scarves, handkerchiefs, or newspapers. But these makeshift measures did little to filter out the toxic gases and fine particles suspended in the air. The smog was so thick that even hospitals struggled, as smoke entered operating rooms, wards, and emergency entrances. One of the most tragic aspects of the London smoke was the dramatic rise in deaths. Many victims were elderly, children, or people with respiratory issues. The smog directly affected the lungs, causing infections, bronchitis, pneumonia, and even suffocation. It is estimated that at least 4,000 people died during the 5 days of the smog. Later research revealed that the actual death toll was much higher, possibly reaching 12,000 deaths, and that nearly 100,000 people suffered long-term illness. Many deaths were not immediate, some occurred weeks or months later, as the toxic exposure worsened existing health conditions. Animals were also severely affected. Cattle and livestock exposed to the smog developed breathing difficulties and required urgent treatment. Zoos and farms struggled to protect animals by moving them indoors and improving indoor air circulation. The transportation system collapsed almost entirely. The railways were delayed, and most flights had to be cancelled. Even walking became dangerous. People reportedly walked slowly along the walls of buildings to avoid stepping into roads or canals. Traffic accidents increased as vehicles literally disappeared in the yellow haze. Public events were cancelled. Concerts, movie screenings, and theater performances shut down because visibility was so poor that audiences could not see the stage. In some indoor stadiums, spectators complained of coughing fits because the smog crept indoors. The visibility was sometimes so low that police officers used torches to guide pedestrians, but even these lights were barely visible. In many areas, the smog created complete darkness in the middle of the day. Street lamps produced only a dim glow, swallowed by the thick black fog. The smoke came from multiple sources: domestic coal burning, factory emissions, power stations, and diesel buses. All these pollutants settled in the air at once. What made the situation even more dangerous was the chemical reaction between fog and sulfur dioxide, which produced sulfuric acid droplets, essentially turning the air into a mildly acidic soup. Hospitals overflowed with patients suffering from chest problems. Many victims arrived unconscious or struggling to breathe. Doctors worked around the clock but lacked resources and technology to deal with such a massive respiratory crisis. During the smog, funeral homes and cemeteries became overwhelmed. Deaths increased so sharply that mortuaries ran out of space, and some families had to wait several days to bury their loved ones. The government's initial response was shockingly slow. Authorities believed the smog was merely a weather issue that would pass naturally. They severely underestimated the scale of the disaster until the death statistics became undeniable. After 5 days of suffocating smog, the weather finally changed on December 9, when winds swept through London and dispersed the toxic cloud. Only then did the full severity of the tragedy become clear. The aftermath caused widespread anger and public outcry. People demanded answers, especially because London had experienced polluted fogs for decades. Yet policymakers had done little to address the underlying causes. The Great London Smog pushed scientists to conduct deeper research into air pollution. They examined the composition of the fog and confirmed the presence of deadly pollutants, including sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, soot particles, and acid droplets. Doctors presented detailed medical reports showing how inhaling polluted air affected human lungs, blood circulation, and heart function. These findings made it impossible for the government to ignore the issue any longer. As a result, the British Parliament passed the Clean Air Act of 1956, a landmark law aimed at reducing air pollution. It encouraged the use of cleaner fuels, restricted coal burning in certain areas, and introduced smokeless zones in cities. The Clean Air Act marked one of the earliest major environmental policies in the world. It demonstrated how public health disasters could drive governments to adopt stricter regulations to protect people and the environment. Over the following years, London slowly transitioned from coal to electricity and gas for heating. Industries were required to use taller chimneys and cleaner technologies. These changes significantly improved air quality over the next few decades. The Great Smog also influenced global thinking about air pollution. Countries around the world studied the London disaster and adopted similar regulations or monitoring systems to prevent such events from occurring in their own cities. Even today, the London smog serves as a reminder of how dangerous air pollution can be when ignored. Modern environmental movements often cite the 1952 smog as an example of the consequences of uncontrolled industrial activity and fossil fuel dependence. It also shaped the understanding of how weather patterns and human pollution can interact. Temperature inversions, like the one in 1952, remain an important factor studied by climate scientists and environmental agencies. Documentaries, books, and academic papers continue to revisit the tragedy, highlighting the personal stories of families who lost loved ones. These accounts reveal the emotional and psychological impact of the disaster, not just the physical. In many ways, the Great London Smog became a turning point in environmental history. It showed that industrial progress without responsibility can have deadly consequences and that public health must always remain a priority. Today, London's air is much cleaner than it was in the early 20th century, but concerns about pollution remain. Traffic emissions, industrial chemicals, and modern pollutants are still challenges. However, the lessons of 1952 motivate continued efforts to protect the air. The London Smog is often remembered as a tragic chapter, but it also sparked essential reforms and scientific advancements. It helped build the foundation of modern environmental management and raised global awareness of atmospheric hazards. Ultimately, the Great Smog of London stands as a powerful example of how human actions can dramatically alter the environment. It reminds us that safeguarding clean air is not just a technological or political responsibility, it is a matter of life and death for millions. Thanks for watching. Hope you like this video.